In this video, we'll learn how to export our textures out of MARI once we're done painting them. Alright, great. So again, I have our Assassin Final project open. Now, this is the project that has all of the layered texture data in it. So if I came over to my diffuse channel, you can see I've got a ton of layers inside of this project. So at this point, let's say that we're done texturing our character, we're done texturing our asset, and we're ready to go ahead and think about getting our textures out of MARI so that we can take them over into whatever other application we may be have plans for using them in. Maybe it's a game engine, maybe it is a primary 3D application of some kind. Well, we need to export our textures out of MARI and write them out as files. So let's go ahead and do this first on our diffuse channel right over here. So the way you do this inside of MARI is just simply inside the channels palette here. We can right click on our channel and there's some exporting options. Now with that channel selected, if we came over to the channels menu, you'll also see export options here as well. So let's talk about what we're looking at here. You'll notice there is an export option and then an export flattened option. Well, the export flatten option will actually go through and flatten the channel down into a single layer and then export one file per UDIM or patch on this channel. So in the case of this particular asset, it's going to write out quite a few different files. Now in the case of exporting without flattening, this is going to export the entire channel unflattened. So if you think about each and every layer that I have inside this channel, it's going to write out a separate image per patch per layer for this entire channel. So that's going to create a tremendous amount of layers, or rather files. So when I'm done with textures like this, typically what I'll do is I'll go ahead and export them in a flattened state. It's much easier to manage the files than to export them unflattened. So in looking at the flattened options here, you'll see that there are three different options. So we can export the current channel flattened. Again, that's the currently selected channel, and I have the diffuse channel selected. We can export all channels flattened. Now, this particular option will export every channel in this object in a flattened state. So we'll end up with 6 different maps all exported at once in a flattened state. Now, we do have the option to export everything flattened. Now, this doesn't pertain to every project. This will only pertain to projects where you have multiple objects in them. Remember, this particular project actually only has a single MARI object. Again, it's this guy right here. So that particular option isn't necessarily available for us on this particular project. So for this one, let's go ahead and just export the current channel flattened. Now, when I choose that here, what's going to happen is MARI is going to it's going to look at the channel and it's going to bring up a save dialog. And when that dialog comes up, it's going to look something like this. So we need to go ahead and browse to the location we're going to save our map. So I'll just go ahead and browse over to my project files where I have those saved. And I have a reference files folder, and inside of images, I'll go ahead and jump inside of my baked maps folder. So inside of this folder, we're going to create a lot of different images. Now in this case, if I'm just exporting out my diffuse, I might want to come in here and create a new folder, and we'll just call it diffuse. And then I can just double click on that and go inside of that. So we have the ability to create files and navigate the file structure as well inside this dialog. So now that's a new folder, so there's no files in it. If there were files in it, we would see them over here. Now there's a real important thing we need to consider when we're saving out MARI files inside of this dialog, and that's this template right here. So this template is basically the naming scheme that's going to be used for each file that's written out. You can see by default it's set to diffuse.$UDIM.TIFF. So basically the UDIM number is the patch specific identifier, and this is typically a good idea to leave as part of your template, especially when you're working with multi-tile layouts. And you'll notice, again, this is popping up because I keep mousing over it, but if we mouse over this template field, there are a number of different entities, or a number of different variables, rather, that we can actually use. Things like $entity would include the object name. $channel would include the channel name. So instead of diffuse here, I could just simply type in $channel, just like so. And that would essentially give me the same thing. Now, the beautiful thing about using $channel instead of diffuse is that if I was exporting all channels flattened, this template would be used for whatever we select it for. So if we wanted to export all these channels at once in a flattened state, we would have needed to choose that option, first of all. But we could come in here once we have our template set, and we could say, I want to use this template for everything I'm exporting. And that way, each and every one of these would come out as their channel name, .udim number, .tiff. Now you can see that MARI supports a number of different file formats here. They're all listed right over here. So we could export out any of these different file formats. All right. So another thing to pay attention to when you're exporting is right up here. It says export layer. Now this is what's currently being exported. And in this case, it's going to say object, channel, and then we're flattening, so it says flattened. Now this will change, and this dialog will oftentimes pop up again when you're exporting multiple channels. But down here, we'll just kind of bounce down to the bottom. We have our color space. Now it's set to automatic sRGB. Now if we just kind of drag this to the side, you'll see here my diffuse channel is set to automatic sRGB. That's where that information is coming from. So MARI wants to preserve whatever color space that we created for that channel in the file format that we're exporting. Let's go ahead and bounce down. You'll see there's another option for small textures. This is a good idea to keep enabled because sometimes when you're exporting a map, that map will have one solid color for an entire patch. And what the small textures does is it allows MARI to shrink down that texture to just a few pixels instead of writing out a full resolution 2K file, say, with one solid color filling it. So this is typically a good idea to keep on. And of course, alpha channels, we should know what those are. And by default, MARI is going to keep those. So let me go ahead and export all the patches out, and you'll see here down in my status bar, MARI goes to work in baking the shader and exporting out our diffuse channel. Now, once MARI finishes with this process, we'll just go ahead and drag an Explorer window over here, and I'm inside that Baked Maps folder, and you can see our diffuse folder was created there. If we jump into here, you'll see each and every texture, and again, it's titled diffuse.1001. Now, I do have my file extensions hidden currently, but you can see this is what the small textures look like. These little guys right here were a solid color, so MARI was able to see that, so it created a very, very small image for these particular patches. But you can see the entire diffuse map was exported out. All right, great. So the color space option will change depending on which channel you are exporting. Say, for example, I'm exporting out my displacement map. Notice that that color space is set to linear. So when we come in and right-click and choose Export Flattened, current channel flattened, you'll see here that my color space, again, it is automatically picking up on the fact that that is a linear color space for that channel. So it's wanting to save into that color space. Now, we do need to keep in mind the file format and the capabilities of that file format when we're exporting a file like this. For example, a TIFF. If we were working with a channel that had some higher bit depth, maybe 16 or 32-bit, like a displacement map is, then we would need to make sure and save this into a compatible file format, one that can actually contain that kind of data. So you can see here there are a limited number of file formats in comparison when dealing with linear, but MARI can export into any of these file formats for you. All right, great. So in this video, we've learned how to export our texture maps out of MARI.